There's a reason I subscribe to your channel, Liana, and it's because you allow discussion and it provide a forum. And I just said in my last video that I think, in fact, whilst I don't think it's possible for MRAs and feminists to work together, I think it would be mutually beneficial that there be a dialogue, because we're kind of on the same topic, aren't we, one way or another. So I subscribe to your channel because actually you are quite rational, and you give an opportunity for there to be dialogue, because you don't delete comments just because they disagree with you. And I find sometimes with your videos that I agree sometimes 95% with you. Sometimes I've disagreed with you, and then you said something a bit later, and I go, actually, no, you're right. I misjudged you. It turned out to be right. And I've listened to this rant, and I started writing comments, and as is often the way of my comments, they just ran on and on and on. I've got verbal diarrhea. Probably the same happened in this video. The video will be over long, I'm sure.
Alright, I'm going to start this video the way I tend to go in the middle of videos. Don't freak out! This is a response to some comments I've been getting lately. I'm appealing to people who I think I can reach, so don't get offended about what I'm about to say. It's an appeal to intellect, not emotions. You can continue to virtue signal, or you can do the right thing and be effective. Your choice.
I did get a bit offended as it happens, but breathe in. That's your shtick. I can't do your shtick. My shtick is to say, this is one blind man reporting on the nature elements. That's my shtick. Yeah, okay. I'm going to get offended, but I'll try and be calm at the end. How's that?
If I were a conspiracy theory type, I'd swear that anti-feminists were agents of the dwark side, the radical feminist fringes of the women's movement consumed by fear, anger, and hate. These two groups sound so similar these days that they might as well be hitting themselves in the face with horseshoes. The horseshoe effect is in full effect. For some reason, many anti-feminists think it's perfectly rational to define the entirety of the modern women's movement by the actions and philosophies of its most radical non-scientific exceptions. Whether by willful ignorance or being blinded by hate and fear themselves, anti-feminists miss the point entirely. By treating the nutbags like the real feminists, they're helping them implement their radical agenda. They're helping to shout down non-radicalized feminists around the world so we can't get much done, because all the oxygen is being sucked up by radicals who don't actually want change. If your issue is really just with radical third-wave feminism, why are you giving it so much attention? The rest of us could really use the help getting established as a viable alternative. By feeding that beast, you're making it stronger.
You can't blame the anti-feminists for giving the radicals air. It's the pro-feminist media that gives the radicals more air, because it's the radicals that get to be the journalists. And we know why the radicals get to be the journalists, because they're the ones that produce the clickbait, and the clickbait produces the dollars. As an MRA, I mean, if you look at the previous video, I don't expect you will, but if you look at the previous video, quite a frequent thing that happens to us is we have the media reporting on what Return of Kings has said, and reporting that as crazy MRAs do this. They're not MRAs. The Return of Kings aren't even MRAs. Not only are they not MRAs, but they vehemently deny they're MRAs, and they're routinely criticised by MRAs. So we get likened to a group that actually has nothing to do with us. You feel you've been misrepresented because somebody's pointing out feminists that actually are feminists and holding them as being representative of your movement. Try walking a mile in our shoes. You know why we draw attention to the I'm not going to say radicals, because I don't think it always is radicals necessarily. We're talking about, when you say radicals, all you mean is groups that want to make societal change. That's not the problem, is it? We're talking about male-bashing feminists. We're talking about misandrous feminists. We're talking about misandry spread by feminism. The reason we draw attention to misandrous feminists is because they're the ones that do damage. It's like, It's like, saying to the West, why do you keep drawing attention to ISIS? It makes it so much harder for us Muslims that are doing community work and fundraising for charities. The reason we keep drawing attention to ISIS is because they're the ones that keep shooting us and bombing us. That's why, because we feel it's a bit of an issue, The reason we draw attention to the radical feminists is the ones that do us harm. It's not just the media that gives them oxygen, which you can understand why they do that, that's for money. The legal system gives them oxygen. You do realise that Catherine McKinnon, who is very clearly on the dwark side, as you call it, advises on legal policy worldwide. She's not trivial in terms of her power base. There are governments that are advised by radical feminists to fund shelters that use the Duluth model, which assumes that in a domestic violence situation the man is the perpetrator, and give him anger management classes even if he is the one who is the victim. Can you imagine being a victim of domestic violence and then when you seek help they go, we'll give you anger management classes? He's not the one who's got an anger management issue. Because of advice from radical feminists, there are countries that are adopting the Nordic model in regards to prostitution, which actually does more harm to sex workers, frankly. I mean, it's a man-hating policy. It's a policy founded on man-hating, but the primary victims of the Nordic model are sex workers themselves. So actually, as a feminist, you should be opposing the Nordic model. And I dare say you probably do. I'm not saying you don't. I'm just saying that they have positions of power in which they could do harm. Governments sign anti-pornography pledges because of radical feminists. That's something you yourself have spoken out against. So that's something, surely we're on the same side as being against those particular feminists that have most influence on the government. And there are radical feminists that have seats in Parliament. I don't know how your Parliament is. We've got MPs like Jess Phillips, who laughs at the idea of having the male suicide issue discussed in Parliament. These people draw attention to themselves. We don't have to draw attention to them. What we draw attention to is the harm they do. Right. Now, I'm going to meet you part way here. I know there are some generic anti-feminists that are not driven by any sort of goal, except we're talking about conservative anti-feminists that just feel uncomfortable with anyone trying to make any sort of change or anything. Anti-feminist trolls, and they will draw attention to nutty stuff like, obscenely obese women holding signs saying, if you don't think I'm beautiful, that's because you're ugly. Or feminists who make art projects and menstrual blood. Yeah, I don't care about those either. They're just nuts. They're not harming anyone. They're harmless nuts. Or if they're harming anyone, they're harming feminists by making them look like idiots. I don't care about Tumblr feminists either I don't care about Tumblr feminists either saying dumb shit. That's fine. It doesn't affect me.
Truly mainstream feminists are working with girls to build their self-esteem. We're working with adult women to encourage accountability, authenticity, and assertiveness that gets eroded by traditional female socialization.
I get it. So you're working with girls to give them self-esteem. What makes you think that girls have a bigger self-esteem problem than boys? We've established that men are either 3 or 4 times more likely to commit suicide, depending on which country we're talking about. Here in Britain, I think it's 3 times more likely. I think in the States, it's 4 times more likely. We know that boys are the ones that are falling behind in schools and that are less likely to go to university. It's much harder for teenage boys to admit to feeling insecure or finding someone to listen to them if they do. Or someone hits himself in the head and tells him that he's stupid. I would tell him that he's no stupider than anyone else. Pretty much all of us are stupid sometimes. And he spilt food on himself at some point while he was eating. He's distracted. I'm distracted. We're distracted. My sister thought it'd be funny to say, We have to get you a bib, aren't we? You not. It's not necessary. And the mother starts cleaning up around him. Not necessary. Just let him have his dinner. Why have you got to make him feel insecure? Why have you got to make him feel inferior? Now, I got upset about that. I said, there's no problem with self-esteem. Yeah, you haven't seen him hit himself in the head and slam himself is stupid. The thing, we worry about girls' self-esteem all the time, don't we? If I had said, yes, but you're on a diet to my sister, that would have been so offensive. Awful thing to say to a girl. To say, we need to put you on a diet. We need to get you a bib. To a boy, he's only like 8 years old at the time. It doesn't matter to knock his self-confidence. Knocking boys' self-confidence is alright. Because that's what makes us resilient. That's what makes us manly. The more we have our self-confidence knocked, the more resilient we are. The more manly we are, right? Because that's what masculinity is forged in adversity. Right? What makes us manly is the fact that no one protects our self-esteem. Doesn't mean that just because we are good at pretending that we have confidence, the more boys swagger, you see boys swagger, some boys swagger, the more boys swagger, the more they're covering up, the more they're compensating for. Don't assume that teenage boys have good self-esteem. So that got a bit impassioned, but I do feel passionate. I do feel passionately about the way we knock the self-esteem of boys. And it doesn't matter, because they're boys, they can take it. You don't know they can't. You know they can take it. You don't know how they suffer behind closed doors. It's not culturally acceptable for boys to show they're suffering, which means that boys' low self-esteem issues aren't visible. I'm going to recommend that you watch Attack the Block. Attack the Block's a really good film. It's a good reason. There's a reason enough to watch it. It's a good film. But secondly, the thing that you'll find when you watch Attack the Block is the main character in it. He was a delinquent kid. I mean, he's got exactly what you feminists call toxic masculinity. That toxic masculinity is about him trying to prove his self-worth because he's got no confidence. He's got to prove his self-worth. He's been knocked so many times. He's been knocked all his life. You see him getting knocked by the girls in the film. You see the self-confidence getting knocked and being told how useless he is. He spends that film trying to prove that he has some sort of worth, which he achieves at the end. He saved planet Earth. It's really ironic that and I'm not blaming you because I've not heard you use the phrase toxic masculinity, but you know the feminist movement does all the time, and it doesn't understand how it contributes to it, because that what you're calling toxic there is boys trying to recover their self-worth, trying to achieve it, and it's not new. It's not like you've invented it. It's historical. This is how boys are taught to be soldiers. Is their self-worth is knocked out of them as early as possible so that they have to recover it. And if recovering it means putting their life on the line, they will. It might be that it's not girls that have the biggest self-esteem issues. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be trying to build girls' self-esteem. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have assertiveness training courses for women, but I was working for the council once and I asked to go on a assertiveness training course. My manager said, why do you want to go on a assertiveness training course? And I said, the thing is, for my job, I have to get timesheets from everyone in the department that tells me how many hours they performed for each department, so I can work out bills going to different departments. I mean, I was working for the council, or red tape. And I said, their jobs are more important than mine. I find it really difficult. I feel like I'm pestering them. And they say, oh, yeah, I'll do it in a minute, I'll do it later. And I feel uncomfortable. And it would help me to be assertive. My manager said, well, yeah, I see, okay. Trouble is, council don't do assertiveness training for men. I know because I asked myself. And they told me, no, it wasn't available. I said, I suppose you probably just said, oh, I'm sorry. He said, yeah. The assumption there when you say, I'm doing self-esteem, or not for you particularly. The trouble there when you're saying feminists are giving self-esteem boosts for girls and they're helping women have assertiveness training courses, but there's no assertive training courses for men. There's nothing doing self-esteem for boys. And boys in education, they don't even have male teachers. The males are severely underrepresented in teaching. They're boys that are not learning to read because they don't have positive role models that read in their presence. You have feminists in the media and in education who knock the self-esteem of boys all the time. I must link you to an article. I'm going to link you to an article, I'm going to get this over, by Doris. This is from 2008. And I want you to read it. And it was about Doris Lessing's experiences of how boys are treated in schools, in classrooms, and the effects she notices. And I noticed a very similar effect, actually. I was working on a production of A Doll's House. I don't know if you know it. Played by Ibsen, which is considered to be a feminist play, although really it's a humanist play. But at the time, it's going to be a feminist play. Although, interestingly enough, it actually informed a lot of my interest in men's issues, actually, or at least helped me put some historical context on certain men's issues. And we discussed men's issues throughout the rehearsal period. The director was a feminist, so but she was feeding me feminist theory, all that patriarchy theory and stuff during it. How patriarchy hurts men too, and all that sort of thing. Talking about, she was really talking about men as ATMs, actually. I mean, some of it really did inform my men's issues knowledge, because there was a lot of it that I was going, yeah, that's right, that's how it affects me. Yeah, you're right. But when we actually came to do the actual play in front of school kids, and then we did a little workshop afterwards, did she discuss how it hurts men? No. It was all about how men oppress women. There was one schoolboy in that classroom. I could see him sinking into his chair. I could see how uncomfortable he felt. I could see how smuggled the girls felt. Yeah, okay, so you do esteem boosting courses for girls. Fine. I am fighting the esteem damage done to boys by feminists. Alright, let's say a bit more. Oh, it was a rant, wasn't it? That was definitely a rant I did there. Now, you could tell me, of course, that the way we train boys to see their self-worth as something they need to recover by performing some sort of deeds in their life is part of what you call patriarchy. You could tell me that if you like. And if by patriarchy you just mean traditional gender roles, you'd be right. But your patriarchy theory, the way it's formed at the moment, the way it's superficially represented, would suggest that the boys would be the ones that don't have the self-esteem issues. And it's the girls that are going to need all the boosting so that they're brought up to the same level as the boys. So in fact, your patriarchy theory has been forcing the traditional gender roles, not challenging them.
People are teaching girls in places like Afghanistan, achieving gender parity in political cabinets.
Yeah. Gender parity in political cabinets. Why are we worrying more about gender parity in political cabinets and we don't worry about class parity in political cabinets? If you're working class, it doesn't really make a difference to you whether the cabinet is full of boys that went to Eton or 50-50 boys that went to Eton and girls that went to Rodine. They still don't understand what it is to be poor. Now, you prioritised gender over class. That's a derailing of a rather important issue about inequality in society, isn't it? So yeah, I'm actually railing at you. I'm railing at the moderate feminists now. I'm railing at feminists like you. Not the radicals, yelling rape culture. I'm railing at you by insisting on patriarchy theory-based policies and a patriarchy theory-based view of the world.
And encouraging body positivity in the media. You may not like the way individual activists and educators do these things, but I think we can agree that the attempts are in general good things. And they're certainly not harmful. We rarely hear about these activities in the press, however. No, we hear about things like rape culture.
Well, it's not the men's rights activists or the anti-feminists that are putting all the rape culture in the news. I mean, we're not really journalists. Well, you know, got blogs. We're not. The people putting rape culture in the newspapers is feminists. Why are you having a rant to us? We're not. Why are you having a rant to us? We're not the ones publishing articles by Jessica Valenti or Amanda Marcotte. We might draw attention to Jessica Valenti and Amanda Marcotte. But, you know, they are doing harm. They're in the media, they're in the news. Who reads those? Teenagers do. These impressionable teenage boys reading that. Again, the esteem issues, the self-esteem issues of boys are affected by feminist journalists that write about rape culture all the time. Because that makes them feel like they're a threat. That makes them feel like they should be ashamed of even noticing breasts, for example. They're making them ashamed of their sexuality. Making them ashamed of being heterosexual. Making them feel guilty about being distracted by naked women on pictures in the tube and going, oh my god, oh, I'm a terrible person. I see women as sex objects. These people affect the self-esteem of young boys. These are about, what was about the feminists that are doing really good work for girls' self-esteem? Well, no, you can talk about that. You're an advocate for women's rights. You talk about that. I'm going to talk about the ones that are doing damage to the self-esteem of boys, because that's what I care about.
Which is just a colloquial phrasing that doesn't have an agreed upon definition. Sure, it describes a collection of things that do in fact exist, but when you make up a shocking term like rape culture, it implies blame shared by all men. It's fun to scream about this stuff in college. Trust me, I did it. But in the real world, it's not productive.
I don't understand. What's going on? I'm so confused. Are you were kind of having a rant to anti-feminists. Now you seem to be having a rant to feminists. Maybe what you're doing is really clever. Maybe you're saying the feminists are anti-feminists. Is that what it is? That's clever. I've argued that before. Oh, you are doing that. I'm really confused. What's going on? So, you seem to be saying that what the feminists are doing on campuses, chatting rape culture, isn't productive. I don't know about any other anti-feminists, but I don't think we're responsible for them doing that. I don't think we made them do that. Unless it's you have to be really clever anti-feminist to have managed to get radical feminists to shout rape culture on campuses. I mean, it's possible. I mean, it's possible that that's happened. That they are, kind of like agent provocateurs sent by the Illuminati to bring down feminism. Are you saying that we're wrong to draw attention to it? Are you saying that we're wrong to talk about it? Okay, I think I get it. I think I get it. I think what you're saying is you don't support that. Am I right? That's what you're saying. So don't blame me for that. I've got nothing to do with that. I don't support that. We know. You did a good video on it. Why are you just saying that we shouldn't be drawing attention to that? Because I think we should be drawing attention to that. That may well be contributing to the lack of boys in college, or the fact that boys drop out of college. It's also contributing to forced relegation of boys in colleges. Colleges being hostile places for young men. That sounds really kind of a sort of meninist thing to say. Oh, a hostile environment. But it is a hostile environment. You have people shouting at you and telling you you're a rapist. That's hostile. How much more hostile can you get? Quite a demonic thing to accuse somebody of being, if they're not, you know. You know, Jackie rape didn't happen. The Jackie hoax. And how there was a fraternity house that had graffiti all over it saying rapes, rapists. You're tarred as a rapist in your place of education, in your place where you're living for like 10 months a year. Again, it's not trivial. You saying we shouldn't be drawing attention to that? Or are you saying they shouldn't be doing it? If you're saying they shouldn't be doing it, I don't think we're the best people to tell. I think we've been saying they shouldn't be doing it for years. Tell them. I know you can't tell them. When I made the pack of Allison earlier, it's like saying, why do you people in the West keep drawing attention to ISIS and draw attention from all the good Muslim people are doing in the community? Yeah, I know you can't stop them any more than Muslims that are doing good in the community can stop ISIS and doing bombing. But you can understand why we want to draw attention to it. You can understand why we see that as the problem. Can't you?
And that's the problem. None of this screaming is productive. The radfem anti-feminist blood war is anti-progress, anti-intellectual, and amoral. It accomplishes nothing but the perpetuation of itself. It's easy to complain. It's easy to criticize. But
when the topic is rape, no, it isn't easy to complain or easy to criticize. It really isn't. Because it's one of those issues that if you are not sure that you're right, then it feels very uncomfortable to talk out about it. It feels very uncomfortable to talk out about something when somebody is telling you it is associated with rape happening. Because then it makes you look like heartless, makes you look like you don't care. Because actual rape is a really serious issue. And to offer a critique to somebody that says, I'm trying to reduce rape, and you go, I'll leave you alone then, you must be doing some good work. When in fact they're not doing good work. They're making people paranoid about culture. Because if you're saying this culture is a rape culture, then that means you're against culture, right? Because when they're talking about rape culture, they're talking about things like romantic movies, and they're saying, well, that's rape culture because that shows a man trying to persuade a woman that he loves her. You go, no, that trying to persuade something that you find them attractive is not rape. And actually, that's quite offensive to say that it is. But if they're telling you that, if they're taking something that serious and using it to demonize all of culture, and if there's even an inkling that they might be right, you don't criticize that, do you? Even an inkling. This is the thing. This is why it's a cult thinking. Because the whole thing about a cult is there is a really awful thing that will only be prevented if you believe. You know, like going to hell. That's how religious cults work, isn't it? You go, if you don't believe in this, you'll go to hell. And you go, shit, I better believe. Even if I start doubting, I must fight the doubt. And that's the thing of the whole cult that's surrounding the rape culture panic. Is it such an awful thing that you wouldn't want to risk risking it, even if you think, I'm not sure if it's right. Anyway, let's move on.
But the anti-feminist criticisms in their current form, they lack substance. For example, a common criticism consists of anti-feminists repeating the most ludicrous kill all men statements of the radfems and proclaiming their inherent stupidity.
You keep thinking that it's just what feminists say. It's not just what feminists say, it's what feminists do. And it's the fact that governments listen to them. They're not just saying dumb shit like ban Father's Day. They're writing academic papers that are dishonest. And those academic papers inform government policy.
What they don't convey is an argument that a stupid statement is an inherently harmful statement. Unless someone actually goes on a murder spree, free speech applies.
I don't think we're trying to stop them from saying kill all men. I think we're pointing out they clearly hate men. It kind of weakens the argument that feminists don't hate men if you have people that clearly identify as feminists saying kill all men. It means you have to admit that some feminists do hate men. Now, I have personal reasons to think that whilst being a feminist does not mean in any way that you are necessarily a Nazi, I do think, and I know Liana, I know you're not a Nazi, I know you're a lovely person. I genuinely mean that, and I'm going to have a little break here and say something really nice. I think you do more good than harm, and I like you. I think you do more good than harm, and I think that's probably the nicest thing that anyone can say to anyone. I think, if we can have that on our gravestones, we'll be happy. You did more good than harm, I'd be happy, that'd be good. But listen, I know that you're not a Nazi, right? I'm not trying to break Godwin's law here, and that wasn't supposed to be damning you with faint praise. I think, you probably prefer she did more good than harm and she wasn't a Nazi. But if you look at what the raw ingredients of fascism are, feminism has it. Feminism says, and I'm not saying that all feminists are female supremacists, but you know yourself that in traditionalism, traditional benevolent sexism, there's a sort of suggestion that women have moral superiority over men, that they're purer, more innocent, just they're civilized as the men. Your better half, it's one of the things we say to men, isn't it? To refer to their wife. Their wives are referred to as their better half. So there's a sort of female supremacy kind of ingrained in traditionalism. And maybe it is benevolent sexism. Maybe it is flattering you into role. I understand that. But look, if you believe you are superior, but you believe that somebody who is inferior has power over you, and power over you in an insidious way that's kind of like a part of a conspiracy, how is that any different? How is that any different from the Aryans thinking that the inferior race, being the Jews, has power over them by some sort of conspiracy? Even though they, as Aryans, are superior, somehow the Jews, who are inferior, have managed to have a conspiracy that covers the whole world and is keeping them all in poverty. You can see how that belief system, even if you had that belief system and it didn't turn you into a fascist, you could see that the raw ingredients were there to make a fascist. So, and I'm not saying that's the only way of interpreting patriarchy theory. I'm not saying that every feminist that says the word patriarchy, that's what they mean. But we know that some feminists use the word patriarchy to mean exactly that. They mean a system that is contrived by men, in which men have all the power, and men use that power for the benefit of men by oppressing and exploiting women. That's the model on which some feminists work. That's their belief system. Now, if you add to that belief system the idea that women are actually superior, and that it's been by some terrible wrong this has happened, that men have got all the power over them, then surely you can see that is the ingredients for a fascistic outlook. I don't think men do have all the power. I think men like to think they have all the power. I think it flatters men to think they have the power. I think telling men they're powerful is a way of flattering men into role, just as telling them they're good is a way of flattering women into role. Telling them they're nurturant is a way of flattering women into role. We both flatter each other into role. I don't think men are as powerful as all that, and I think we underestimate our own vulnerability sometimes. Yeah. So whilst you're saying, "Hey, feminism ain't a hate movement," it has the ingredients of a hate movement. Particularly when they're talking about there being some sort of rape crisis, a rape culture, because that is exactly what a fascistic group would say about a group they felt threatened by. Because we know that the nationalists in Europe are saying that about the Syrian refugees right now, and we know that the KKK said that about the blacks, and it's a very common theme to use to drive hate against a demographic, right? So yeah, there's a hate element in feminism. Feminism has the potential to be a hate movement. I'm not saying that every feminist has interpreted feminist theory in such a way to make them to be haters themselves. I'm just saying it has the ingredients for a hate movement. And if we've been warning about that, and you're saying, no, it's not true, I don't hate men, yeah, I believe you don't hate men, I know you don't hate men. But we're trying to warn people that this has a potential to be a hate movement, and there are feminists that are preaching hate, that are actually saying something like kill all men, which is it's pretty much a smoking gun in terms of proving the theory that it's a hate movement. That's why we're drawing attention to it. You know, look, you're saying it's not a hate movement. What about that? How much more evidence do you need? That's what that's about. It's not about trying to silence them. It's about saying, look, we've been telling you they're a hate movement, and here they are acting like a hate movement. Okay, move on. I mean, it may well be that the reason why radical feminists get so vocal during times of recession, because I remember them being particularly rabid during the 1980s. The reason that they get so vocal during times of recession is times of recession are the times that sort of fascism tends to get a hold. Quite interesting to see if there is a correlation between radical feminism being particularly popular and racist nationalism being very popular. They do coincide. They both coincide with economic recession. Yeah, and intersectional feminism, which is supposed to be dealing with all the ways in which one can be a minority, what is effectively done is it has made the villains an intersection of all the majorities. An intersection of all the majorities is a minority. That's how intersections work, isn't it? If you do a Venn diagram, the bit in the middle of a Venn diagram is the smallest bit of the diagram, isn't it? So whilst, if you're heterosexual, you're in a majority. About 90% of us are heterosexual. If you're white, you're in a majority. About 70% of us are white. If you're male, you're in a minority, 49%, but it's almost a majority, or do. If you're cis, you're definitely in a majority. I think probably only 1 in 1,000 aren't cis. You start putting those together, and you've managed to cook up a minority, haven't you? It's already a minority. Once you go down to 49%, then you reduce it down and down and down. That's not to say that men's rights should be exclusive on the grounds of race, because in fact, a lot of men's rights issues affect black men 4 times more than they affect white men, as it happens. For example, incarceration rates. Men are incarcerated at a much higher rate than women are. But black men are incarcerated a lot more than white men are. Deadbeat dads, again, I think it's about 4 times. And that's a form of, deadbeat dads is a form of scapegoat society. Because everyone loathes deadbeat dads. So you put the phrase deadbeat dads and goes, yeah, they're quite deserving they get. The majority of men that will be labelled as deadbeat dads will be black, because we're talking about men of low socio-economic status, who are deadbeat through no fault of their own, because they can barely afford to maintain themselves, let alone anyone else. So there's a article I'd like you to have a look at called Deadbeat or Dead Broke. It particularly looks at African American fathers, but it's what it's saying would apply to any father of low socioeconomic status. So I suggest you have a look at it, because it queries the way we quantify fathers' contribution to their children in purely economic terms, which is very patriarchal, isn't it? Or traditional. I'll say patriarchal. I'll say patriarchal because I'm sucking up to a feminist. Lauren Farrell in the book, Myth of Male Power, he does mention the word patriarchy, and he says that there are legitimate uses of the patriarchy, and there are illegitimate uses of it, but he recommends not using it because it is so heavily associated with the non-legitimate usage of it. He recommends saying traditionalism instead of patriarchal as a recommendation, not taken on board by the feminists, obviously, because I very much doubt that very many feminists have read Warren's Myth of Male Power. You may have done, because I know you've spoken about male disposability, and that's one of the things that Warren raised as a concept. So maybe you have, or maybe you've heard it secondhand by another source. It could well be that because it's time of recession, that in fact that's why it's a particularly virulent form of man-hating feminism that is on the rise in the media and in society as a whole. And that means moderate feminists like yourself are a kind of minority. Certainly in terms of being vocal, you're a minority.
Arguments like this are weak.
I beg your pardon? Well, if you're going to be like that, I'm ending it right there. Of course, Liana isn't actually referring to my argument being weak. Whether or not she finds my argument weak remains to be seen. And therefore, we're ending on a cliffhanger. Join me in part 2 of this trilogy. It is a trilogy. I've looked at the length of the whole thing, and it's a trilogy. So this is one blind man reporting on the nature of elephants. Other opinions are available. Cheerio.